Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for this session where we will be explaining to you some of the general concepts of automated market makers based decentralized exchanges. My name is Walter Hernandez. I am a research fellow at the DLT Science Foundation and I collaborate at the UK Centre for Blockchain Technologies. And apart from that, I am a student, current PhD candidate in financial computing at University College London in London, in England. First things, before going into much details about automated market makers based decentralized exchanges, we need to look at the high level, traditional finance. So in traditional finance systems, we have borrowers and lenders, and we have an intermediary connecting them. In this case, lenders, they are depositors who provide liquidity to a bank, and then this bank provides this liquidity to entrepreneurs and other people that want to use this capital in order that can pursue some of their activities. To have in mind is that these intermediaries, or the trust in these intermediaries, is based on them meeting financial regulation and proper sounding rule of law. So, but that's not always the case. So we can see, for example, at the 2008 financial crisis. So these are some newspaper example of some of the events that happened during that time. We have some of these banks, that Lehman Brothers is the most popular case. And then some regulation came into place to improve or reduce some of these issues. But still, if we saw last year in 2023 in March, this was specifically, we saw in the US with the Silicon Valley Bank that experienced some issues. And it was not the only bank. There were other banks such as First Republic and other banks like here in Europe, such as Credit Suisse that have to merge with UBS because of other issues around the time. Then this brings us to decentralized finance. So decentralized finance in this case shows itself as an alternative, or you can always even say as a complementary system to traditional finance, where you don't have to rely or trust in a single party such as a bank, but rather the trust is distributed among all the participants that are part of a distributed ledger. So because of that distribution, then DeFi, or decentralized finance, inherited this trustless and permissionless nature of a distributed ledger technology system, which in this case, the most known example of a DLT system is blockchain. Now, I want to show you this example about lending and borrowing, so we can relate back to traditional finance, although the focus for this talk is not lending and borrowing, is automated market makers based decentralized exchanges, but it gives us a good segue into what we want to discuss more about AMMs. In this example, as you can see, lenders provide their liquidity into a smart contract from where they will receive some interest from the issuing of these loans to borrowers. And borrowers interact with this smart contract to get some loans. And to do that, they provide assets that have to be over collateralized versus the amount of the loan that they receive. The best example for this type of activity happening here, we can find it in traditional finance with mortgage loans, where to get a loan, in this case, you provide as a collateral a real estate property over which you receive a loan below the value of this real estate property. And the benefit in this case of this approach is that a lender will receive a higher return, while a borrower will be having a lower interest rate compared to traditional finance, where both parties will be slightly worse off. In this case, because there's not an intermediary in the middle that needs to earn some of this. Now, coming back to what is of interest of this talk, which is AMMs. Looking at the taxonomy of decentralized finance in blockchain at a high level, we can see the different elements within them, and then here is the location of what we care. Automated market makers and some different types of them. The main focus for this would be the ones that make use of a constant function market maker, which we will see in more detail what that entails, what that looks like. And then you can see here the lending platform, in this case Aave is the most popular example, Compound is the other one, and then how they make use of AMMs as a price oracle. Right, before we jump into look directly into AMMs, we need to understand a predecessor of automated market makers, or where automated market makers are based on. And this one is order books, limited order books in this case. In this example, as you can see in the screen, we have buy orders and we have sell orders. Each one of its size divided by the mid price, and then the mid price is determined by the interactions of these buy and sell orders. And now, of course, in the middle you have market makers that are providing liquidity depending on the activity in the market. So and that liquidity, and then market makers, what they earn is the spread between the bid and ask prices. That's how they earn the liquidity. Now, comparing these limited order books with the current existing AMMs, we have this example here where when you go into AMM based DEX as a liquidity provider and you want to provide liquidity, you deposit tokens within a price range. Now, how the price range is managed will define if you are working, for example, with implementation that Uniswap V2 has, or with implementation that Uniswap V3 has. In the case of Uniswap V2, so if you deposit your liquidity from price 0 all the way to infinitive, that would mean that when someone comes swapping against the liquidity in either price range, they will be swapping against your tokens provided has liquidity, and then you will be receiving fees for them. Now, Uniswap V3 has a different type of implementation where if you as a liquidity provider can decide to put your liquidity between this price to this other very specific price, and then as more people put more liquidity, they will likely want to put their liquidity in ranges that are closest to where the current market price is for that liquidity pool. So it will look like a pyramid where the mid price is in the middle. And this will be an example of a pool with this distribution where we have ETH on the right and we have USDT on the left, and you can see most of the liquidity is concentrated in the middle. Now, this is for liquidity pools that are already created, but now how would you as a liquidity provider go and create your own liquidity pool in a decentralized exchange? So, for example, Token X. This is, let's say you are issuing your own token, or you know there's already a token that exists there, and you want to create a pool in order for people to go and acquire a token and make use of it. You need to deposit as well another token, token Y, in order that your token will be quoted in terms of this other token. Most likely token Y will likely be a stable coin or some other base token that will have a likely stable value. But most of the time it usually tends to be a stable coin. So now how, in this case, the price will be determined of both tokens. This using the constant product formula, which keeps a ratio of one token to the other, and imagine that you need to keep a constant value between both of them in order that when you remove or subtract one of the token, and since the constant has to remain at the same value, that will determine the token that you receive in exchange for the other. And then this is where we are automating the market maker. So all this market making activity gets automated instead of you having to rely on a third party to be the one providing liquidity between both of them. Now, we can compare some of the conservation functions. For example, here we have the one used by the XRP Ledger AMM versus the one used by Uniswap V2. You can see on your left that, for example, the XRP-AMM uses a geometric mean market maker, which when you look at it and you simplify the formula, it looks exactly like a constant product market maker. So the same idea of keeping two tokens at the same ratio. And so with the idea now, going back and look at the implementation of the constant product market maker in the form of a bonding curve or as a function, you see that this shape would be in relation to the distribution of both tokens, where the current price in the market will be the slope of this bonding curve. So in this case, the slope determines the price of both tokens, so depending on the distribution along the bonding curve of both of them. Which leads us to you as a liquidity provider. When you provide liquidity, for example, here we see if by inputting 10 tokens of token A and plus 1 token of token B, the effect of that is shifting the bounding curve to the right because the amount of liquidity provided increase. And then the contrary effect will be if some of that liquidity gets withdrawn, it will bring back, it will shift the bounding curve to the left. Now, of course, you as a liquidity provider, when you provide some of that liquidity, you will get a certain amount of liquidity pool shares, which represent how much you own of the liquidity provided on that pool. So for example, here, for this, where it's provided 10 tokens of token A and 1 token B, 4 liquidity pool shares are provided back. And then how we calculate that is based on the total of the reserves and then based on the amount that you provided into the pool. And then the withdrawal, of course, will be the contrary. You get back the amount of tokens that you provided, given your ownership of the liquidity pool. Now, in the case of traders, here it will be swapping against the liquidity available in the pool. So the effect is that to move along the bounding curve, either up or down, because we are subtracting either amount of token A and provide amount of token B, or the contrary, so it will be an up or down type of effect. The benefit of AMM-based DEXs is that there's a possibility of creating pools for assets that sometimes will be illiquid in the market. So for example, you're issuing your own token and you want people to be able to access it, to buy it. So this is a good way to do it, by as well providing another asset that will quote the price of your own token. And of course, the pool shares, as we know, represent the ownership of the pool. Other type of tokens that are related to AMM-based DEXs are governance tokens that are, this is at the general level for all the different parties involved in the protocol level for a pool, for a DEX. Now, we are not going to spend too much in the math part, but still we want to show you the high level. And then we will jump in to show you some direct examples so you can get your hands on practicing some of this math, but this will be useful to get a general definition. So we look at this pool where we have two assets, asset X, which could be, for example, XRP, and then asset Y, imagine this is the Ripple USD, and then we can draw a bonding curve representing both tokens. Here, when we come and try to interact with this pool, the quoted price will be the slope of this bounding curve, and then how we impact this pool can be defined by this formula. So the price that you have before the swap and the price of the pool after the swap. Now, something to consider is that although you get quoted at a specific price when you are executing this trade, the actual price in which you end up executing your trade will be sometimes different. Either will be higher or lower than the price that you got quoted. And that difference between both the effective price or actual realized price and the spot price is what leads us into the slippage, for which we have this formula here, but I will show you rather with some numerical example to understand it better. So we've been talking so far, showing you formulas of conservation function, how it look like, etc., and how most of them, although they might have some tweaks here and there, they still have the general idea of a constant product. So, for example, looking at this for Uniswap, we have two tokens. We have my token on this side, on the y-axis, and I have ETH on the x-axis. So if we initialize this pool with 72 of ETH and 50 of my token, the constant will be, multiplying both of them, will be 3,600, which would say that the initial spot price of my token in terms of ETH will be 1.44. So this is just dividing both tokens that we provide the reserves to. And then let's say someone, a trader, could be us, could be someone else, comes in, interacts with this pool, and they sell 70 of my token, so that for ETH. So that would mean that we are increasing the amount of ETH from 70 originally to 120, and we are reducing the amount of my token to 30. Now we will have a different price because now we need to update. So previous division that we did, we now do it with the amount of reserves, and we see the 0.25. And here the idea is that we're trying to keep the same constant. So that this would be the constant that we have, and then given the change in x2, what will be the amount of x1. Now there are some implicit costs. We saw at the general level, theoretical level, how slippage looks like for a trader, but there are also implicit costs for liquidity providers, in this case impermanent loss. For the case of slippage, it would be when we provided the reserves, we have an initial spot price of 1.44 for my token, the token that for which I created the pool. And then let's say when we do the trading, we get quoted this 1.44, but when we do the trading, because of arbitrage activity and other transactions that were not reflected at the time that I got this initial spot price, because between the time that I get quoted the price and between the time that my transaction gets actually executed, some transactions might be reflected in the middle. The price that I get quoted, it's different, and that difference from my initial spot price and the actual price, that would mean that I'm, as a trader, I'm actually losing what I'm receiving for per each my token in terms of ETH. And then for the divergent loss or impermanent loss, both terms are used interchangeable, meaning the same thing. But the main idea is that having put my liquidity into this pool versus kept this liquidity upside in the market without doing nothing, what will be the effect between both of them? So what we can see is now we know that the available reservable ETH are 30, but and then we see in the market that the value of that ETH is 2, so that would mean probably 60. And then when we compare it with the initial reserves that we provided versus the value of them in the market, we see this difference. So that as a liquidity provider, that means a loss that somehow needs to be compensated. And the way liquidity pools compensate for this is with the transaction fees received by traders who execute the trades against the liquidity provided in the pool. And this is a good paper that I recommend to you if you are very curious and you want to see a more financial mathematics approach looking into impermanent loss. And then this is a general question for you watching this. In If I'm not going to give you the answer, this is for you. And if you can go back and see the previous explanation and see if you can find the ratio. You will be able to do it. Now, liquidity pools, apart from all the benefits that we have and how they reduce intermediation and needs of a third party, relying on a third party, they still suffer of some type of attacks, and some of them are depending on which layer you're looking at. So there are some attacks that are at the infrastructure layer, these mainly miners, and then there are other attacks that are at the smart contract level and attacks directly at the application layer, at the AMM based DEX layer. So at the infrastructure layer, the block timestamp manipulation and the changing of the sequence of the transactions that are mainly related to how mining works in some blockchains. In other blockchains, you won't necessarily have that issue, and we will come in more detail to explain that. And then for the smart contract layer or the middleware layer, the reentrancy attack is pretty much when a contract calls another contract that is compromised, and then that compromised contract gets some access into the contract that has access to the liquidity pool, and then can drain that liquidity pool. And then for the AMM based DEX attacks, the main focus, or at least for us to look into more detail, would be these ones that are related to the interaction with the miner, and then as well with the slippage. These other two attacks, like vampire attack and rug pull. Vampire attack, in this case, it's the name, although might sound, the name just try to indicate is, for example, when a DEX provides better yield to attract liquidity providers from other desk. So pretty much withdrawing the blood from other decentralized exchange. That's what it means. But you can also argue that's part of normal competition in a market. And rug pull, we will look into more detail, but rug pull has been, if in the last couple of years, has been all over the news as a type of attack. And then sandwich attack from back running, that's pretty much an interaction between the miner and arbitrage. So, but for example, one of the attacks, which is mostly related with the Oracle, or in this case, the application of flash loans attacks, is that, say you can go and get a loan of X amount of, for example, ETH, and then go check a DEX that might have any assets on their value and buy those assets with the loan that you got in ETH, and then go to another DEX where you might see that they have the same assets over value, and then you can go and sell there in that other desk, and then you go and pay your loan as well at the same time, with the difference in this interaction between the DEX that had the asset under value and the DEX that had the asset over value being the profit that you can receive. And then all these 4 transactions happen in the same block. So that's why it's a flash loan type of attack. You can see this is how, for example, it can look like if you try to use different platforms, lending platform and DEXs together, and how things that you can do to combine to do this type of attack. And then the rug pull attack, this has been all over the news. Lots of projects that have done this, that have pretty much, they go mint a new token, a new coin, they create a liquidity pool, and then they start promoting the token, and then people might get interested and then go provide liquidity because they might see a lot of activity happening in this pool. And then the main or the biggest owner liquidity provider might go and withdraw the liquidity, which is pretty much pulling the rug and everyone else. Some example that we have seen is SafeMoon, has been all over the news. This is a screenshot of the SEC lawsuit against them, where you can see some details of some of the activities that they did that might put them into this category and might have led the SEC to do this lawsuit against them. And as well as how concentrated some of the liquidity was among one single owner, which is around 50%. This is another paper that I've done with some of my colleagues, where we looked at some of the liquidity concentration during Silicon Valley Bank collapse on March 2023. And some of the main findings is that there's an overall liquidity concentration among these pools that we look at among a few players, so more than 0.99 Gini coefficient. In this case, Gini coefficient is a metric used to measure inequality, where a higher amount, a bigger amount from 0 to 1, a bigger amount will imply a big concentration among a few hands, and a lower amount will mean more equality, so more distribution among more people. So the effects of this is, for example, during market turmoil, you can have parties such as this wallet that we have here as an example, withdrawing from one of the pools where he was a big top provider, and then he moved to another pool, becoming a big two provider in them. Now for the next attacks, it's important to understand how the mempool works. For some specific blockchain, it does not necessarily mean that all blockchains work the same way for the mempools, but at least Ethereum, which is the most popular one where most DeFi is happening now, this is how they work. So it is by, for example, a user will send a transaction, and another user will send another transaction, and on and so forth. And those transactions get aggregated into a mempool that everyone can see all the pending transactions. Then a miner would get the right to add the next block into the blockchain. And then the miner at the same time gets the right to timestamp those blocks and decide, for example, which transaction they will put in the block. But what that will imply is that as well, the miner will decide the order of the transaction. So, for example, even though one user might have been the first one who sent the transaction, and there might be another user who was last, the miner decides if the last user put the transaction first and the other user who did it first. And that gives us the effect for example, sandwich liquidity pool attacks, where a transaction of providing liquidity might be wrapped with one transaction in front and another transactions back, so pretty much making a sandwich of them. And the same thing with a sandwich price attack. And this is an example where you can see this is an example of two sandwich attacks, where the attacker, what it does is they see that someone is buying certain token from this pool, a star ETH pool pair in XRP2. They see that they're buying some tokens there, and what they do is that they buy first the token, raising the price of the token, and then the next user is paying a higher price, and then the attacker goes and sells the token. So pretty much that difference between the buy that they did and the sell becomes the revenue that they get. The three transactions happen at the same time because they are in the same block. And for that, the attacker will have to pay, for example, an extra fee to the miner in order to receive that right to put the transactions in the order that they want. And at the same time as well, you can even argue that probably the attacker sometimes might even be the miner because they have these extra monetary incentives to do that. And so that's for sandwich attack. Now for the case of arbitrage, how that looked like and why that's an issue in AMMs, it's important to understand the effect that the block confirmation times have in arbitrage. So here we can see the price, for example, the price in Binance, that they use their limited order book, looks a bit higher, while the price in Uniswap is lower. And the reason for that is that Uniswap has a delay, you can say a delay of 12 seconds before the transactions of the previous block gets added and then update the price to the right value. In the case of Binance, the market maker is the one they're constantly responding to limited order books and sell limited order books, sell or buy, and that updates the price quickly. While in Uniswap, there's this limit in the amount of time to reflect the prices in the market. So our arbitros can take advantage of this by looking at the difference between both of them and then given the time difference between both blocks. So how you can mitigate that, this issue pretty much related to how fast a blockchain processes the transactions, is by either increasing the block times, so make it faster, and at the same time for impermanent loss, for the case of liquidity providers, you can try to increase the amount of fees to compensate them. So either by having dynamic fees that adjust that the market maker can adjust, which is immediate in a limited order book, but an AMM given its design is something that is not that possible. And of course as well auctions, by auction rights for certain activities in AMM, and then taking some of the fees of those auctions and distribute it back to the liquidity providers. An example how some of these have been incorporated to try to solve for this is the XRPL-AMM, where they leverage the XRP Ledger faster block processing time, which is only 4 seconds, compared to Ethereum. And what we saw in the last slide, intuitively, the time between a block takes to confirm the transactions, and then the XRP-AMM also implementation, continuous auction mechanism, brings some fees, extra fees to the liquidity providers in order that then it can reduce the impermanent loss that they suffer from providing liquidity into the pools. And this is this implementation, the proposal that was done a few years ago, but it was only implemented around March or April of 2024. And another benefit, of course, that you get using the XRP-AMM is that you have lower transaction fees. And this also is another benefit because then it means that traders get more benefit for the trade, so they get higher returns because they don't have to spend as much money as they do in paying fees for executing their transactions. Another thing is that the XRP-AMM is protocol native. So coming back to this example where we saw the different layers of an AMM based centralized exchange, that they use a middleware layer on top of an infrastructure layer. In the case of the XRP-AMM, it's directly integrated at the infrastructure layer. So that has some extra added benefit, and in terms of not having to compete with all the smart contracts for computation and other type of transactions, but rather executing directly at the protocol level. There might be other disadvantages as well, for which, of course, there's a need of more research. If you're watching this video, also some encouragement for you to go and explore the XRP-AMM based DEX and see some other research or future world opportunities that might be there, either as an advantage or as a disadvantage. Now, front-running and sandwich attack in the XRP-AMM based DEX, how would they look like? Are they possible or not? The way the XRP Ledger consensus mechanisms work is that miners do not have the same incentives that miners have in Ethereum, where they get paid for the transactions that they execute, for the transactions that they include in the block. Here, miners do not have that type of incentive, and the mempool, there's no equivalent of a mempool on the XRP layer. The closest would be because there is a pseudo-random assignment of transactions, also a block is already proposed to a miner with pseudo-random, in a pseudo-random fashion to decide which transaction will be put in that block. So a miner does not know which transactions they are mining into the next block that are into the blockchain. So front-running and sandwich attack, likeliness of executing them are reduced, but that doesn't mean that they are completely eliminated. There's some research from one of my colleagues, Vito Tumas. I recommend you to look at some of his research where he shows there's still some possibility to do it, but it's not as easy or straightforward to do as, for example, in blockchains like Ethereum, which is quite popular in DeFi. And then we also have the continuous auction mechanism, which is a novel thing that XRP-AMM implemented in 2024. Now other decentralized exchanges have followed through and have also implemented some of their own. And in this case, for the XRP-AMM based DEX, what they do is that traders or arbiters, they do bidding to get a daily slot, offering a 0% trading fee. And then in this bidding to get this slot, these fees get paid back to liquidity providers. And here you can see how the algorithm works. And then you can pause this video and then go look in more detail if you want to understand more how it works. But the main idea and the main purpose for you to get intuitively is that this is a mechanism with the purpose of reducing impermanent loss and reward better liquidity providers. Other interesting design, which is particularly unique for the XRP-AMM based DEX, is this feature called path finding, where what it does is that before the XRP Ledger had its own AMM, they had a DEX that worked in the same way as a limited order book does, with manual matching of buying and selling of tokens. So now the XRP-AMM combined both systems, and so when a trader comes and trying to execute a trade, it will try to find the best possible auction that provides the best liquidity to them. And you can see here an image as an example of this. And this is some of the research that we have carried with some of my colleagues, where we do a benchmark of the XRP-AMM based DEX with their continuous auction mechanism versus a more generic AMM based DEX, which is closer to Uniswap V2. And our finding is that when you incorporate the continuous auction mechanism, what does do is that it harvests volatility from traders and arbiters who want to take advantage of these opportunities where there's more volatility. They want to trade more so they can generate more money. So they go and bid more to get some of these slots, zero trading slots. And by doing so, it improves the price synchronization with an external market. And that will lead to a more stable prices. And then as well, we saw intuitively what is the importance of having faster blockchains with faster to confirm block times. So when we do that with the XRP layer, when we compare it, we can see that having a faster block time actually reduces price slippage and as well as price variation when we compare it to an external market. So we can see, for example, as well in our research, how important it is to have a faster blockchain to reduce the slippage. So this is one of our findings. So when we compare the XRP layer quicker block interrupt time in this case, what it means is when you submit your transactions versus when the transaction gets actually confirmed, how that affects price slippage. We see the importance of that. And that's validated from other research where they take high frequency data from Binance and then they do some simulations how that would look like if this were a blockchain, and then if you increase or decrease the block times, and how important it is to have faster blockchain, so which translates into shorter block confirmation times. And this is a this is a development, for example. Mindful of that, Uniswap went and launched their own L2 chain, where they are trying to reduce the block times, because that way they can experience some of the benefits that we discussed. And as well, they're proposing other things such as a sequencer builder separation. So the way Ethereum works now is that the miner does the mining of the block, and at the same time proposes the transaction to be added. So there are some conflict of interest that you can see there. And but when you separate and you put a sequencer and a builder and to be two parties, you are likely to reduce that, but still there might be some conflict between them. And then they propose some encryption with the mempool to reduce the issues related to a mempool being transparent, and then that leads to attacks such as sandwich attack, Frontrunning, and etc. and some of the attacks that we saw. But the main takeaway from this is the importance of having a fast and reliable infrastructure in consideration about for the design of an AMM, and that despite all the benefit that decentralized finance, especially automated market makers, based centralized exchanges offer, there is a lot of work that needs to be done, more research that needs to be carried. We are well aware, and the research community and DeFi is well aware of some of the issues that are now, and it's good to see how some of these are being addressed by either trying to use faster blockchains or trying to see how reduce some of the issues related to the conflict of interest, and as well as trying to combine auction mechanisms, and trying to as well use or complement automated market maker with a limited order book. And thank you very much for your time. I hope this has been an insightful and educational talk. Go back as you need to go and review, pause this video as much as you need to go see some of the material, and as well as read in more detail, practice some of the exercises that were provided to you there, look at some of the formulas, and thank you again for your time.